I think that when we were in TechCrunch, we had told everyone, up until that point, we had built out a functioning product for less than $100,000, which was almost unheard of
Yeah.
in the medical device space. And we really had that in our mind. Like, I think like when we won TechCrunch, we had me and my co-founder, we were like, hey, let's just like walk to the after party rather than ordering an Uber so we can save like $20. And we're holding this $100,000 check and walking like 4 or 5 blocks underneath like a highway to get to like
You just wanted to show it off.
You just heard from Robbie Bustami, the co-founder and CEO of BioticsAI. BioticsAI is building an AI Copilot for ultrasound that helps detect fetal abnormalities. We get into what it looks like to build a company in a regulated space, and how to think about product development when you can't just move fast and break things, and what it takes to assemble the right mix of engineers, clinicians, and advisors to actually bring something like this to market. I'm your host, Isabelle Johannesen. This is Build Mode, and this season is all about building your team. BioticsAI won Startup Battlefield in 2023, and we talk about how that moment helped shape the company's trajectory, from clinical partnerships to fundraising and beyond. Applications for Startup Battlefield 2026 are now open, so nominate a founder or yourself at techcrunch.com/apply. Before we get into my conversation with Robbie, I want to thank all of you listeners for tuning in to another season of Build Mode. This episode wraps up season 2, but don't worry, we'll be putting out some bonus episodes and extra interviews until we drop our next season this summer, which will be all about our most requested topic, fundraising. In the meantime, do us a favor and rate and review this podcast wherever you're listening right now. Share Build Mode with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your doctor even. Anyways, enough of all that, let's hear from Robbie.
Hi, Robbie. Welcome to Build Mode.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to chat and hear about everything you've been up to since winning a Startup Battlefield in 2023.
Yep.
So a bit ago, but I know you have a lot of exciting updates. Let's start by giving an overview of, yourself and what BioticsAI does.
And as you know, Robbie Bustami, CEO and co-founder of BioticsAI. And at BioticsAI, we're using AI to detect fetal abnormalities. Core problem we're solving is that half of pregnant patients with a fetal malformation today are misdiagnosed. They're mainly misdiagnosed due to errors by ultrasound operators. So we built out this AI Copilot that can plug into any ultrasound machine, and it will help improve the overall quality and accuracy of the diagnosis for a pregnant mother.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm sure there are many lives and, emerging lives that you can save with this technology. Tell me a little bit about where you were at when you did start a Battlefield, sort of traction and product development wise.
Yeah, so back in 2023, so we had essentially built out our proof of concept, proved out our initial AI algorithms, but we hadn't started our clinical validation, clinical studies for the FDA. Essentially, we did a live stream with an OB-GYN and a patient that was kind enough to lend us her time, and we were able to actually showcase the solution. So we had a functioning product, but we hadn't fully validated it yet, especially across all the different patient demographics that you need to make sure you test on. And that's where we were at. So we were essentially launching to the world, showing everyone what we were doing, and really also trying to educate the public about the problem that we were solving. And we effectively were able to gain momentum to build out a community of people that worked with us to start our FDA clinical studies.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and clearly your message resonated with the judges, with the audience, because it took home the grand prize. So tell me a little bit, or maybe describe sort of what device are we using? Like, what is the use case in the hospital or in the doctor's office for the patient?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So essentially, fetal ultrasound is really the cornerstone of diagnostics for a pregnant mother. The mass majority of fetal abnormalities are screened for using ultrasound. But what happens is there's a real operator-dependent issue today. So there's a wide spectrum of skill sets across the United States in terms of being able to capture an accurate screening so you can do an accurate interpretation and diagnosis of the scan. So the patient comes in, gets their screening done. Now, if not all of the key components of the fetal anatomy are captured, then the patient becomes vulnerable to a misdiagnosis. So what we've built out is this software backed by AI models, runs on a tablet, it can plug into an ultrasound machine, and essentially it works as a concurrent reading aid. So the operator will be capturing the screening, capturing all of the components of the fetal anatomy that needs to be evaluated, and our solution is providing effectively a real-time assessment and feedback loop to the operator. So that way, let's say they missed one of the parts of the fetal brain or one of the key structures isn't properly visible. they can make sure they capture that so that way they can do an accurate interpretation and the patient gets an accurate diagnosis.
It's interesting. I think we're seeing a lot of femtech rising these days. And I'm very curious to hear sort of how you got into this space and like what resonated with you about the problem that you wanted to dive into solving it.
I mean, I was raised in a family of obstetricians. So my mother, her sister, her brother, they all worked in maternal care. So grew up around the problem. I mean, my mom would travel as well, like trip back to the Middle East. She's originally from Yemen. So that's where she started as an OB-GYN and then later worked at UC Berkeley as a researcher in public health, primarily focused on maternal care. So grew up around the problem. I was a tech geek as a kid. So I grew up during the Silicon Valley tech boom in San Francisco. A lot of software developers in my neighborhood. My next door neighbor, who was my babysitter, was a software engineer at Oracle. And he would watch over me and just be like, hey, let me teach this like 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid how to code. And that really stuck with me. I ended up launching apps throughout my teens. Launched my first gaming app when I was 12. Went to school for computer science, specialized focus in computer vision, then worked at IBM Watson, AI and data engineering. But at the end of the day, my end goal was really wanting to build something that could really be applied to the general US population to make people's lives better. And I was like very acutely aware of the growing problems in prenatal care. And I got the opportunity to meet Dr. Hisham Al-Gamal, who was our current chief medical officer, who had just finished an award-winning paper in using AI for differential diagnostics in prenatal ultrasound. And we got together, we looked at the core problems that are really impacting maternal diagnostics, but also like early intervention of potential issues. And we essentially found, hey, we could totally combine my expertise in computer vision and AI with his expertise in fetal medicine to build something that could really help people. Fast forward a few years later, and we're FDA cleared for that exact product. So
fantastic. I mean, huge congratulations on your FDA clearance. Let's talk about that for a minute. So when did you apply for FDA clearance, or how did you start this journey?
So the official submission was last year, but the journey started way earlier. Really, actually, I would say from day one, making sure that everything we did on the product side, we did it in a way where we were taking safety and efficacy and accuracy and all into account as we developed the product, and really combining the product side with the clinical and research and development side with the regulatory side. So combining those kind of 3 different angles together, we really made sure that we could have a successful FDA clearance. So applied last year, but before that, we had our FDA clinical studies. And before that, product development, we really had FDA at the top of our mind as we did everything that as we built everything that we ended up submitting to the FDA for.
And so we had a previous episode on Buildwood where we dug into heavily regulated industries and FDA clearance. But I'm curious to hear sort of, were you building the product knowing what the FDA would expect of you, or do you sort of go into some of these trials with a black box and you have to pivot, you have to iterate? How do you sort of move through that typical startup iteration process while following FDA guidelines?
Yeah, totally. So the FDA offers something called a pre-submission, where you can essentially meet with the FDA and showcase what your planned clinical study is. Not just clinical study, but whatever it is that you have questions about, the FDA will be willing to meet with you on. So we met with the FDA earlier on, before we really started a lot of the things that we ended up doing, to kind of validate the clinical studies, the clinical data that we were collecting to be able to test our models against and so forth. And then from there, it really helped us kind of construct the overall clinical study, bring on the right healthcare partners, the right health systems. We ended up collecting tens of thousands of images across varying patient demographics across the United States. So from an FDA standpoint, yeah, you definitely don't go into it blind. Just say like, all right, yeah, no, you meet with the FDA initially, and then from that point, you kind of construct what your clinical study is going to look like and make sure everything you're doing on the product side is really taking that into account.
And so now that you're FDA cleared, what does that mean for you? What can you now go ahead and do that you've been sort of, holding back and needing that approval to do?
Yeah, now we can launch at hospitals. Yes. So we can launch at yeah,
sweet exactly. Victory. Okay.
I know. It's a longer. I mean, anyone that works in medical devices understands kind of the long haul to get to that point. But now we actually get to see our product in action, which is, just seeing a test site and seeing like physicians using the solution. It's something else, like seeing that kind of vision that you and the rest of the team had really come to fruition. So we're planning to launch this year across hospitals around the United States and continuously growing, right? So we have really our full core product, which manages the standard fetal anatomy screening that every single patient gets. It's the most comprehensive tool on the market for a mid-trimester anatomy examination, which is where the whole fetal anatomy is captured and assessed and so forth. And what we're doing right now is now we're expanding on top of that. So looking at some more specific fetal abnormalities that we can detect, and also expanding across really the reproductive health journey. So looking at potential maternal conditions that can come about, gynecologic conditions, and so forth. So
Wow. I mean, as a woman, thank you for doing this work because I mean, there's such a black box in the healthcare system about women's reproductive health, and I think it's really, really awesome that you guys are obviously taking steps to solve this and to dig more into the research and obviously collecting data that the AI can use to better help diagnose some of these issues. You must have worked with hospitals during your clinical trials and sort of up until this point, right? So are those hospitals kind of your first go-to for your go-to-market now that you're officially launched? How do you plan to take this to market now?
yeah, I think from a strategic angle, for any startup that's really working within med devices, you can really kind of combine your clinical testing, clinical validation with your go-to-market. So to sell into a hospital, you have to win over a lot of different stakeholders, and you have to prove out the concept clinically and all that sort of stuff. So that's exactly what we did. I mean, together to get through the FDA, we built out a team of roughly 15 maternal fetal medicine specialists across the United States, and we partnered with hospitals and health systems throughout all of that. And during that process, exactly right. So our first adopters are our clinical partners that we worked with on the research, on the data collection, and so forth.
And you recently moved to New York because there are potential clients there and a hospital that is going to deploy this first. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of our research partners is based out of Brooklyn. They're called Maimonides Medical Center. So we've been working very closely with them. And New York is a really great hub because you have all these great hospitals, Mount Sinai, New York Presbyterian, Northwell, and so forth, all kind of within this close proximity. So right now I'm in New York, but we still have got a couple of co-founders here in the Bay Area. But it really helps us kind of tackling both coasts and making sure the product's deployed all across the United States. So
I guess I'm curious, as the leader of this company, how do you manage these sort of anticipation of getting FDA cleared with your team and yourself, right? When you know that you want to go launch this to market, you want to help save all of these lives, but you have to wait for this approval.
Right.
How do you sort of keep the motivation and the momentum going internally?
Right. So there's a few different pieces, right? I think one is, I talked earlier about that alignment in terms of like the regulatory, the product side, and the clinical side. That also means aligning all the different team members. So that way everyone's fully aware of what exactly that it is that they're building and why they're doing what it is what they're doing. So we don't have everyone kind of operating in their own little kind of like tunnels, right? Like the machine learning engineers doing their own thing, the fetal medicine specialists doing their own thing. Everyone's pretty well connected in terms of what we're doing and how we're getting to that goal. So everything really is a full team effort. And then within that process, you're also constantly seeing wins on the R&D side, right? So sure, getting to FDA clearance is a long haul, but in that process, you're bringing on new healthcare partners, you're running clinical studies, you're preparing paper publications and so forth, and showcasing the results to different people within the industry. So it's a matter of, I think, having those like wins along the way as you prepare for FDA clearance, and also making sure everyone is completely aligned, even if it's really maybe outside of their technical scope, but making sure they're aligned in terms of how we're doing it, who we need to work with, and how we get there. So
is there ever a risk that you won't get FDA cleared? And of course, I'm sure it could be iterative where you like take pivots and you get there eventually. But is there ever a risk where they'll just be like, full stop, no, this can't happen?
I think the risks on the regulatory side, there's a couple things, right? So yeah, the FDA could say no, right? I think that's probably, when you're an early stage startup and you're like fundraising before you get FDA cleared, that's probably the number one concern every investor has. Is like, what if the FDA says no? The FDA didn't say no, so we're in a good space now, but that's definitely a risk. But that's why I think you prepare everything early on, right? So what often happens, I think, with some startups along the way is they'll prepare the products and then they'll look at the regulatory side. And then they realize, oh my God, retroactively, we have to go back and change a lot of the things that we did. We made sure we incorporated everything into our development from the beginning. So we really de-risked a lot of it along the way. The other side of the FDA, I think that's probably a little bit tricky, is AI is really new. So there's a lot of changes with the expectations and the regulations as the FDA learns, as they clear more and more products. So I think, regulation, I think at the end of the day is a good thing because you understand what the expectations are. So, but I'd say that's the other risk, is things are changing as the FDA learns, as new products get cleared. But as long as you're kind of staying close and monitoring exactly what those changes are, then you can kind of slightly pivot here and there wherever you need to.
Well, speaking of pivoting, I want to talk about Startup Battlefield for a
Sure,
second.
sure.
So again, you won Startup Battlefield in 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yep.
I want to know what the experience was like. That was even before I joined TechCrunch, so I wasn't there unfortunately to see your pitch, but I've seen the videos. And your demo was legendary with an actual pregnant woman involved in the demo. It was really phenomenal. Tell us about just how that experience was for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was super exciting. I mean, for one, I think it was around like over 3,000 startups that had applied. And then you make it to your top 200. Just making it to the top 200, we were ecstatic. We're like, oh, this is awesome. This is super exciting. And then you make it to the top 20 and you come in and you see all these other startups that are there, and everyone's technology was phenomenal. Everyone's working on something that's like super innovative, brand new, brilliant minds like all around you. So I think meeting everyone, being involved with everybody else was really, really cool. And then also the TechCrunch team was great. Like they really helped us formulate the story, right? I think, we're a bunch of geeks, like, which is, I think what TechCrunch kind of takes pride on, right?
Yep.
Is like working with kind of like the geeky founder. And it's just, we're a bunch of engineers and doctors that are really obsessed with solving this problem. So they really helped us in kind of structuring everything. Like, how do you formulate your backstory? How do you formulate how do you formulate the problem, the solution, and so forth? So really great learning experience in terms of how to communicate everything that we're doing to the public. And then, winning TechCrunch and being on stage, and the stadium's filled. Everyone's not stadium, the room, I guess, the crowd is filled. And it's anything can go wrong. You're doing the product live, but it was a really, really cool experience. And it helped us really, kind of like what I was saying earlier, really educate the public about the problem we're solving, and also get the support that we need. We were really able to build out a community of MFMs, OBGYNs, investors, engineers to really come on board with everything that we were doing. And that TechCrunch demo, we found out that there were OBGYNs that were sending the demo to each other.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I was going to say, it's not necessarily that there's a bunch of OBGYNs in
Right.
the TechCrunch audience. It's a little niche for the
Right.
grand scheme of TechCrunch, but that's fantastic that the video itself could be, floated around and
Exactly.
beneficial like that.
Yeah, it was super. Yeah, physicians were like sharing with each other, and and then we were getting like feedback from there, like OBGYNs reaching out. So that was really cool to see as well. And so it was a great experience, great learning experience, and then just the overall process was awesome.
That's fantastic. And when the confetti goes off in your face, it's a lot to be up on that stage when the winner is announced.
Oh, it was unreal. Yeah, we were like because there were so many great companies.
Hmm.
And it's not like, at the end of the day, a win isn't guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to go in and say, hey, like, we're going to give the best possible demo, best possible presentation. We weren't too worried about the Q&A. It was kind of like, we know this problem inside and out, the product inside and out, whatever questions we get, we'll be able to answer them. So we were excited about showcasing all of the work we were doing, but it was never guaranteed. So me and my CTO, Chaskin, who's in the back, kind of operating the whole demo. Yeah.
DJ boothing the demo.
Exactly.
if you will.
DJ boothing. I'd say the real hero during the whole presentation. We were taking bets on who we thought we were going to win. And then we were like watching, all of a sudden BioticsAI gets announced, and I'm just like in shock. Like,
had you bet on yourself? Were you in your own bet game there?
Yeah. We were like, if we don't win, like, who do we think is going to win? Yeah,
You're like, I'm putting $20 on us.
Yeah.
And
we had a couple side pots, but super excited. The confetti fell, you go up there, you're holding the trophy. And
I am curious to hear your take on sort of what is the most challenging part of being an early stage founder, maybe specifically in the MedTech space.
So one, it requires a lot of patience, right? MedTech is just naturally going to be longer. So when you're talking about product development, we talked about a lot about clinical testing and validation, but making sure that the product is safe and so forth. And then even your go-to-market, you're talking about longer sales cycles. So it definitely takes a lot of patience and a lot of planning, a lot of strategizing as much as possible early on. Because in the MedTech space, it's not like, I'd say like maybe a direct-to-consumer based product where you can kind of launch your app, get immediate feedback, and continuously iterate. You can only launch once you've fully validated. So a lot of talking to potential users, a lot of talking to physicians, hospitals, validating the clinical ROI, the financial ROI models, and so forth. So that sort of diligence is really important. In terms of what's the most challenging, there's a lot of challenges. So it's a little bit difficult to say. I'll kind of maybe go through the different parts of being a founder, right? So I think on one side, on the fundraising side, right, there's a lot more risk And there's on like the medical side, especially with regulated medical devices for investors. So you're talking about a smaller pool of specialized investors that understand the space to be able to like fundraise from. So again, it goes back to the diligence. You have to sit and you have to understand who exactly understands the space. Do they invest in this area and so forth? And then working within that specific ecosystem. In terms of the regulatory side, you need to make sure you're bringing on people, right? I'm a first-time founder. So, and my background's in data and AI engineering, grew up around physicians, but I'm not a physician myself. So really made sure that we partnered with doctors that really understood the space, people in academia that really understood the research side. And then on the regulatory side, partnered with the right consultants, people that have done FDA clearances, especially within AI where it's relatively new. So there's only a handful of consultants that really understand how to clear an AI product. So finding those people that have done that in the past and so forth. So making sure you kind of bring the right expertise around so you can be prepared for that long haul that it takes. And then maximizing its efficiency is really important, right? I think we always had it in our minds like how do we kind of maximize every component of this process? Because when you're talking about deep tech, medical devices, things can get costly very, very fast if you're not really trying to optimize everything that you're doing. So I think when we were in TechCrunch, we had told everyone, up until that point, we had built out a functioning product for less than $100,000, which was almost unheard of in the medical device space. And we really had that in our mind. Like, I think I like when we won TechCrunch, we had me and my co-founder, we were like, hey, let's just like walk to the after party rather than ordering an Uber so we can save like $20. And we're holding this $100,000 check and walking like 4 or 5 blocks underneath like a highway to get to like
just wanted to show it off.
Just showing out, to the passerby, random strangers on the street
honking,
right? But it really takes that kind of like that psychology, I'd say, and that kind of discipline to make sure that you're really evaluating everything that you're doing from a cost benefit analysis standpoint and sticking with it. So that way, when you do have the funds, when you are ready to raise, it's like, okay, now we can scale, we can do things in parallel, we can grow the team in the right way, and we can tackle the market in the right way, and so forth. So making sure you're keeping that top of mind early on, and again, it's a long haul. So really staying motivated for the future and understanding where you're going to get to. So
yeah, it sounds like you have to be very mission driven from the beginning, and like this, it's very different from starting a SaaS, like an AI SaaS for enterprise company, right? Where it's a little bit more like, much quicker growth, right? And we have the goal is a lot of more VC focused and a lot quicker returns, and we're going to exit versus I feel like health tech founders are, we want to save this baby, and that might take us 10 years to get to that point. But like that North Star is so bright that you just kind of, it keeps you on that path. So it's
absolutely. Yeah. And it's definitely a very different process in terms of how you iterate. And I think making sure you understand like what is the iterative process and how do we do that is really important. So that way you strategize in the right way and set the right expectations for everybody and for yourself and so forth. So.
Yeah. But I loved your point about, bringing on all of the right people, different types of advisors. I mean, legal consult, regulatory consult. I'm wondering if you brought those people on formally to your team or if you sort of keep them as advisors or, I mean, I know you have your chief medical officer is on the team full time. How do you sort of balance like external advisors and bringing them on full time?
So it depends on what it is that they're working on. It also, I think in the medical space, it also depends on what is, like sometimes it's more useful for a physician to be an advisor, right? Because you want them to continuously be practicing. So that way, at the end of the day, it's like they understand the full scope, right? We're not trying to like get a physician to leave their job. We don't want less MFMs in the United States. We need more. But it really depends on like what it is that they're serving for the overall mission and what it is that they're doing. And then how much time do they need to put in and how do they put that time in, right? So there are some physicians that we work with, researchers that we work with that will come in for maybe a few hours a month on a particular project. Some that maybe they're putting in hours day in, day out. And I think that's really, it comes down to like, what is the need and then how often do they need to be here? And then also what is the utility of them continuing to practice, right? Because for some of our partners, right, we have physicians that we work with where they are also our like early testers. They get to test and validate the solution and provide us that initial feedback. So that's only possible if they're only serving as advisors to the company. So I'd say that's probably the big piece is looking at, well, like what is the core component that we need? And then how do we work back, you work backwards from there and then you find the right team members for that particular role or whatever it is.
Well, how many people are on your team now?
We're still, so internally, we're
Mhm.
still a very small team. So we're
Okay.
still like 7 full-time people
Hmm.
on the team. But overall, in terms of the number of MFMs that are with us part-time, a number of researchers as well, like biostatisticians and so forth that are with us part-time, it's about 30 individuals.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so so overall, it's a larger team, but everyone's, we're managing everything in a way where like different groups are managing different parts of the process and so forth.
And so how are a lot of these people working with you in exchange for equity, or do you pay them hourly? I'm just kind of curious on, in the spirit of advice for other early stage founders in the space, how do you sort of go about enticing and managing so many different types of backgrounds who, many of these doctors probably never thought about joining a tech startup
Right.
and sort of how do you go about
It's
approaching them?
a combination, right? So there are some individuals that work with us hourly on a paid basis. Some of them do also have equity in the company. Some of them are also investors in the company on top of being advisors in the company. It comes down to, especially when you're talking about whether it's medical or other types of specialties, if you're bringing on a group of potential team members that maybe don't come from this world, when it's definitely kind of educating them in terms of like what the process is for, how this equity grows, what that means, what are the risks, right? Being very transparent and honest. For anyone that we do offer equity in exchange for them working with us, we tend to give them options as well. It's like, hey, we could also pay you hourly if that's something that you're more comfortable with. Or here's like the equity package and this is how it could potentially grow. It made, from our standpoint, and I think this is what I recommend for other startup founders, it made a lot of sense for us to have fetal medicine specialists with equity in the company, because now they're like fully vested and they really are a part of the team, and they're, for everything that they're contributing, they're getting something back, right? In terms of, that we're helping BioticsAI grow, and it also, the value of their shares are growing as well. And I think that's like also a right way to do it as well, is making sure that everyone that's involved is also being rewarded for the work that they're putting in. So, and it helps with kind of building out that larger community. So you want to build a large community of specialists that want to solve this problem.
Mhm.
And by kind of providing them with somewhat of an equity package, whatever that might look like, it really helps. I think the last piece of advice I give to founders as well is like, also, if you are giving equity, make sure there's also like a clear-cut objective that you want the individual to do, right? I think one mistake I know I made probably early on, and I'm sure other like founders do this. It's like, okay, here's this advisor, big name, does all these things, right? Maybe they've like exited from they've sold their last company, whatever it might be. But if it doesn't translate into, the simplest way, if it doesn't translate into revenue for the company in one way or another, then you probably shouldn't, like, you can give that equity to someone else that really is going to provide value. So really making sure that you're really simplifying what it is that they're doing for the company, and then kind of just effectively providing that return for them.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And of course, bringing on all of these, OBGs and people who are working in the space and doctors who want to see your product in the market and be able to use it with their patients is the ultimate, stamp of approval, the ultimate product market fit, to see them investing in your company and being on board. So that's really, really exciting, and huge congratulations on everything you guys have accomplished up until Battlefield and much more even post Battlefield. My gosh, I love to see the rocket ship that happens when people win Battlefield.
Thank you.
And so to kind of wrap up, I want to know, obviously with your FDA clearance and you're going to launch and go to market, what are your sort of like hopes and visions for BioticsAI, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you think you will have been able to grow the company to?
So our goal is to be the AI diagnostics platform for reproductive health.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting with obstetrics, but ultrasound is the tool of choice across not just obstetrics, but gynecology, urogynecology with like pelvic floor ultrasound, urology, and also neonatal care, because you're talking about the flexibility of medical imaging. It's a very powerful tool in terms of being able to detect a wide variety of potential conditions. There's no radiation, right? So it's a very safe tool to use for medical imaging. So because of that, and because it's the diagnostic tool for choice of choice for reproductive health, we can really tackle this operator dependent problem across a number of different verticals and really scale out the solution. It also makes sense for us because obstetrics is at the end of the day, it's very adjacent to gynecology. It's adjacent to neonatology. It's adjacent to urology and so forth. At the end, everything's very well connected. So as we grow and as we scale across obstetric sites, we'll be able to scale into these adjacent centers as well. So we're building out really the next iteration of BioticsAI, which doesn't just tackle quality control and accurate diagnostics for fetal ultrasound, but we're looking at conditions like placenta accreta spectrum for the mother, making sure we're looking at gynecologic oncology, where ultrasound is used, and evaluating malignancies and the uterus and so forth. And we're looking at pelvic floor ultrasound, so making that transition also into urology. and urogynecology. So evaluating really a full spectrum of conditions. And then I think that's the direction that we're going to be going over the course of the next 5 years. Hopefully you'll see Biotics AI across a lot of different reproductive health centers and for a lot of different use cases within reproductive health.
Thank you, Robbie, so much for joining us today. And again, thank you for building Biotics AI because it's such an important tool.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. And it's always great to be back here with TechCrunch and being able to talk about everything that we've been doing. So thank you so much.